You know, there's a certain kind of quiet you only find in a place like Havenwood. It's a peace that settles deep in your bones. For 10 years, this town has been my sanctuary. And my practice as the town doctor has been my calling. I thought my life was like our house, sturdy, dependable, built on a foundation of trust. And at the center of it all was my husband, Julian, my charming, brilliant Julian, the architect who wasn't just building houses, but building a better community. He was our town's golden boy, its hero, and I more than anyone believed it. That belief was the first thing to shatter on a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. The steam from my coffee was still fogging up the windowpane when my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Maya. She's an investigative journalist in Chicago. So her calls usually have an energy, a certain kind of city-fueled urgency that always feels a world away from Havenwood. But this was different. Her voice was stripped bare of its usual confidence. It was tight, strained. Elara, are you sitting down? I gave a little laugh, turning from the window. I'm a doctor. Maya, I'm never sitting down. What's wrong? You sound like you've seen a ghost. There was a pause, filled with the faint sound of traffic from her end. Worse, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I've just seen your husband. My brow furrowed. I glanced through the window into our backyard. And there he was, Julian, on his knees in the rich soil of our garden, carefully planting tulip bulbs for the spring. His back strong and familiar. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair. He looked like a man from a catalog advertising a perfect life. What are you talking about? I said slowly, a knot of confusion tightening in my stomach. He's right here. He's been in the garden all morning. No, that's impossible, Maya insisted, her words sharp, slicing through the morning calm. He's here, in Chicago, at the Four Seasons. I just saw him walk through the lobby with Isabel Devereaux. You know, the predatory developer from Boston? They were close. Elara, too close. His hand was on her back. The world tilted. My mind tried to stitch the two images together. But they refused to fit. The man in my garden, covered in honest dirt, and a man in a luxury hotel, touching another woman. It didn't compute. It was a glitch in the universe. Maya, you must be mistaken, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's someone who looks like him. It has to be. I've been a journalist for 15 years. Elara, I notice details. It was him. The watch I gave him for his birthday. The small scar over his left eye. It was Julian. Before we continue, I want to take a moment. If you've ever had a gut feeling that something was wrong, even when the world told you everything was fine, this story is for you. These are tales about finding the strength to trust your instincts. If you believe in the power of uncovering the truth, please consider subscribing. It helps us build a community for those who need to hear they aren't alone. Now, let's get back to that impossible morning. I don't remember ending the call. My hand was trembling as I lowered the phone. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter, acidic. The quiet of Havenwood felt suffocating. I stood there, frozen, just watching the man in my garden. He looked up then, as if sensing my eyes on him, and gave me that heart-stopping smile. The smile that had charmed the entire town. The smile I'd built my life around. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward the back door, his boots thudding softly on the stone path. The door opened, letting in a gust of cool, pine-scented air. Morning, love, he said, his voice as warm and comforting as it always was. Felt like a good day to get the spring bulbs in. You know how Mrs. Gable next door loves to see them come up. He mentioned our elderly neighbor, the town's matriarch, weaving her into the fabric of his perfect, caring husband persona. He walked over and kissed my forehead. His skin smelled of soil and fresh air. It was the most real, most tangible thing in the world. And yet, my sister's words echoed in my head. I just saw him in Chicago. Is everything all right? He asked, his brow crinkling with concern as he studied my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Just tired, I managed to say, forcing my lips into a smile that felt brittle, like a pane of glass about to shatter. Long night at the clinic yesterday. He accepted it without question, turning to the sink to wash his hands. I watched his reflection in the dark glass of the window. The man in my kitchen. The man in Chicago. One of them was a lie. And in that moment, a terrifying new thought took root in my mind. What if the lie had been living in my house all along? Denial is a powerful anesthetic. It has to be. As a doctor, I've seen it numb the sharpest edges of grief and fear in my patients. And now, it was flooding my own system. My sister had to be wrong. Stress, a long flight, a trick of the light. There were 100 logical explanations. There was only one Julian, and he was right here, humming a tune from a band we both loved as he measured out the coffee grounds. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was starting to take root in the rich soil of my carefully tended life. I decided to run a little test. A diagnostic, you could say. I leaned against the counter, trying to sound casual, like a wife making conversation on any other Tuesday. Julian, I began, my voice a little too bright. I was thinking about our first anniversary trip this morning. Remember that tiny bistro in Old Quebec? Le Coin Caché? The one where it started pouring rain and we were the only ones there for hours? He turned from the coffee maker, his face breaking into that warm, nostalgic smile I knew so well. It was a memory that was ours alone, a cornerstone of our personal history. How could I forget? He said without a single beat of hesitation. You wore that blue linen dress. And you were convinced the waiter was judging us for ordering a second bottle of wine. We shared that crème brûlée with the candied violets on top. You said it was the best thing you'd ever tasted. Every detail was perfect, flawless. He remembered the dress, the waiter, the dessert. He even remembered a silly comment I'd made. And that's what terrified me. His recall was too perfect. It wasn't the fuzzy, slightly flawed way a real memory works. It felt recited, polished, like an answer he'd prepared for an exam. The anesthetic of denial began to wear off, and a cold dread started to seep in. You're right, I said quietly, turning away so he couldn't see the look on my face. I'd forgotten about the violets. I made an excuse about needing to pick up some supplies for the clinic and left before he could ask any more questions. Driving through the familiar streets of Havenwood felt different now. The town I saw as a sanctuary suddenly felt like a stage. And I was the only one who didn't know the play had changed. Every friendly wave from a neighbor, every smiling face, felt like a part of an elaborate illusion designed to keep me calm. My last stop was Gable's General Store. It was the heart of Havenwood, a place that smelled of fresh bread, old wood, and coffee beans. The floorboards creaked in a rhythm that was as familiar as my own heartbeat. Mrs. Gable was behind the counter, her sharp blue eyes missing nothing as she stacked newspapers. She'd known my husband since he was a boy, had watched our entire relationship unfold from her perch behind that counter. Elara, dear, she said, her voice like gravel and honey. You look a bit peaky this morning. Everything all right up at the clinic? Just a long week, Mrs. Gable, I lied, grabbing a bottle of milk from the cooler. She paused her work, leaning on the counter and looking at me with an unnerving intensity. Well, you tell that husband of yours to take better care of you. Saw him this morning, planting those tulips. Good man, you're Julian, always has been. She paused, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. Funny thing, though. What's that? I asked, my hand freezing on the cooler door. She tilted her head, looking out the large storefront window as if searching for the right words. He's just different lately. Can't put my finger on it. She waved a dismissive hand. Probably just me being a sentimental old fool. But you know, Julian always used to smell of something real. Sawdust from his workshop, fresh paint, honest to God sweat. That's the smell of a man who builds things. She looked back at me, her eyes locking onto mine. Lately, though, he just smells expensive, like a magazine page. He doesn't smell like sawdust and honesty anymore. I must have stared at her, my mouth slightly agape, because she quickly laughed it off. Pay me no mind, dear, just the ramblings of an old woman who's been here too long. I paid for the milk in a daze and walked out into the crisp autumn air. The bell above the door chimed, marking my exit. I stood on the sidewalk, the milk bottle cold in my hand, and replayed her words. It was a strange, nonsensical observation, an old woman's rambling, just as she'd said, but it struck a chord deep inside me, a place that logic couldn't reach. My sister. The journalist had given me an impossible fact. Mrs. Gable, the town's heart, had just given me an impossible feeling. And standing there, on the main street of my perfect town, I realized they were both telling me the same thing. The man in my house, the man I'd built my life with, was a stranger. The picture-perfect facade wasn't just showing cracks. It was about to crumble. The drive back home was a blur. I couldn't go back into that house. Not yet, not while he was in there. Moving through our rooms, touching our things, wearing my husband's face. So I called Maya. "You were right," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. There was no relief in her voice. Only a grim, professional focus. The sister was gone, and the journalist had taken her place. "Okay, Elara, listen to me. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you know anything. We have no idea who these people are or what they're capable of. You're a witness, not a warrior. Not yet. What are you going to do?" I asked, watching the lights of Havenwood begin to twinkle below. Each one a home, a family. That felt suddenly vulnerable. "What I do best," Maya replied, and I could hear the determined click of her keyboard in the background. "I'm going to find out who the hell Isabel Devereaux is. And why she's meeting with a man who looks exactly like my brother-in-law." The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I moved through my own home like a ghost. A polite stranger to the man I shared it with. I went to the clinic, listened to heartbeats, prescribed medications, and smiled at my patients. All while a silent scream was building inside me. The impostor played his part to perfection. He asked about my day, made dinner, suggested we watch a movie. Every normal, loving gesture felt like a violation. A calculated move in a game whose rules I was only just beginning to understand. While I was living a lie in Havenwood, Maya was hunting for the truth in Chicago. She sent me encrypted updates. Short, cryptic messages that painted a terrifying picture. First message: Isabel Devereaux, real estate developer, nicknamed the Vulture, buys up distressed small towns and turns them into luxury resorts. Leaves nothing but chain stores and pink slips behind. Second message: she operates through a shell corporation, Northwood Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware, a ghost company, impossible to trace ownership, almost. Third message: found something. Northwood has been buying land around Havenwood for 6 months. Small, insignificant parcels at first, old farms, unused logging tracts, but the pace is picking up. They're getting closer to the town center. I read her messages late at night, huddled in my study with the door locked. The impostor sleeping soundly in our bed just down the hall. The house felt different at night now. The familiar creaks and groans of the old wood no longer sounded comforting. They sounded like secrets the house was trying to tell me. On the third night, armed with Maya's information, I decided to run my own investigation. I waited until the rhythmic sound of his breathing echoed down the hallway, a sound I now found repulsive. Then, I crept to the living room. My laptop screen a single point of light in the oppressive darkness. My hands shook as I typed in the password to our joint bank accounts. I'm a doctor. I'm trained to look for anomalies, for the subtle signs of disease that hide beneath a healthy-looking surface. I applied that same clinical precision to our finances. Everything looked normal at first glance. Paychecks deposited, mortgage paid, credit cards cleared, a perfect picture of financial health. But a good diagnostician knows you have to look deeper. I opened the documents for our mortgage. And that's when I saw it. A home equity line of credit. Approved 2 months ago, for $250,000. An amount that was high enough to be significant, but just low enough not to trigger a mandatory in-person meeting at our small-town bank. My signature was on the digital paperwork. A perfect, seamless forgery. My breath caught in my chest. I felt a wave of nausea so intense the screen in front of me blurred. Our home, our sanctuary, the foundation of our life had been leveraged. Used as collateral. But for what? With trembling fingers, I clicked to see the disbursement records. A single wire transfer for the full amount. Sent the day after the loan was approved. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the name of the recipient. The letters burning themselves into my brain. The recipient was Northwood Holdings LLC. The room went cold. The connection was undeniable. A clean, Sharp line drawn between the man sleeping in my bed and the vulture circling my town. This wasn't just about another woman. This wasn't just about stealing my husband's identity. This was bigger, more sinister. They weren't just trying to destroy my life. They were using my life, my home, and the trust I had in my husband as the funding to destroy everything I loved. The betrayal wasn't just in my house. It was descending on all of Havenwood. And I was sleeping with the enemy. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. The silence of the house pressing in on me. Every creak of the floorboards above. Every sigh of the wind outside. Sounded like a threat. The man sleeping in my bed wasn't just an impostor. He was a co-conspirator in a plot to gut my town and steal my future. The knowledge settled not with a crash, but with a chilling, terrifying calm. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a core of cold, hard clarity. My grief would have to wait. Right now, I needed a doctor's precision. I needed to find the source of the disease. The next day was a performance. I moved through the morning routine with a deliberate calm I didn't feel. My senses heightened to an almost painful degree. I wasn't watching a husband anymore, I was observing a subject. I noticed the small things I'd previously dismissed, the way he held his fork. More like a city person than the country boy Julian had always been at heart. A slight inflection on a word that was more Boston than Vermont. These were tiny inconsistencies, brushstrokes on a masterpiece of a forgery, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. My mind kept replaying Mrs. Gable's words, turning them over and over like a smooth, dark stone. He doesn't smell like sawdust and honesty anymore. It felt like a riddle I was meant to solve. The impostor came home late that evening, claiming a long conference call with a client. He walked in, shrugging off his trench coat and hanging it by the door. He thought I was upstairs. I watched from the shadows of the hallway as he paused, checked his phone, and then quickly stepped out onto the back porch, closing the door behind him. He was out there for less than a minute. When he came back inside, a faint, acrid scent trailed in with him, a smell that was utterly alien in our home. Later, after he'd gone up to shower, I walked to the coat rack, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I slipped my hand into the pocket of his coat. My fingers brushed against a small, rectangular box. I pulled it out. It was a crumpled pack of cigarettes. Not a common American brand, but something imported, with elegant French lettering. Gauloise. The world seemed to stop. It wasn't just that Julian didn't smoke. It was that he couldn't. He had severe, lifelong asthma, and tobacco smoke was his most violent trigger. We'd left parties, requested different tables at restaurants, and I'd even stitched a small, discreet pocket for his inhaler into the lining of all his suit jackets. It was a fundamental, biological fact of the man I married. A fact this impostor, for all his perfect research, had either not known or not cared about. This was it, the tell, the one irrefutable piece of evidence that my body, my doctor's mind, could understand. This man was not my husband. And then, another memory surfaced, sharp and clear, a few months back, outside the Havenwood Community Playhouse after a show. I'd seen Leo Morin, a talented but perpetually struggling local actor, leaning against the brick wall, smoking that exact same brand. I remembered the distinct smell, the foreign-looking pack in his hand. My hands were steady now as I walked to my study and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Playhouse website. I clicked on the Our Actors page. And there he was, a black and white headshot of Leo Morin. His eyes dark and soulful. The same eyes that had been looking at me over the dinner table for months. The screen dissolves into a flashback. It's a dark, rainy night, months ago. The real Julian, sharp-suited and radiating a cold menace, sits across from a desperate-looking Leo Morin in a quiet corner of a bar. Julian slides a thick envelope across the table. It's a foreclosure notice. Julian, V.O., your family has owned that farm for 100 years. Leo, generations of Morins. It'd be a shame to see a bulldozer go through it. A real Havenwood tragedy. Leo, there has to be another way. The bank won't give me another extension. Julian, the bank owns your debt. But I own the bank. Or I will. Here's another way. You're an actor. You've been waiting for the role of a lifetime. Well, I'm offering it to you. You just have to play me. Just for a few months. For a very, very appreciative audience of one. The flashback ends. We are back with Elara, staring at Leo Morin's face on her screen. The pieces of the puzzle click into place with horrifying clarity. The blackmail, the desperation, the performance. I closed the laptop. The quiet hum of the machine was the only sound in the room. The ghost in my house now had a name. Leo Morin. He wasn't a phantom from some international conspiracy. He was a local boy. One of our own. Trapped in a lie. And the real monster, my Julian, had been pulling the strings all along. The fear that had been my constant companion for days was finally changing. Hardening into something else. Something colder. Something far more dangerous. I knew who the impostor was. I knew why he was doing it. My next move wasn't to run or to hide. It was to confront him. I knew I couldn't confront him in the house. That was my space, my sanctuary, and he had violated it enough. Confronting him there would feel like another defeat. No, this had to be on my terms. I called the impostor, Leo, on his cell phone. My voice professionally calm, the one I used to deliver difficult news. I told him there was a problem with the house's plumbing. A potential gas leak, and that the utility company had advised we stay out of the house for the afternoon. I told him to meet me at the playhouse. I'd be there after finishing up at the clinic. He agreed without question, his voice a perfect imitation of Julian's concern. I found him where I knew he would be, backstage. The theater was empty and cavernous, smelling of dust, old velvet, and the faint memory of 1,000 different lives lived on its stage. A single, bare bulb, the ghost light, cast long, lonely shadows across the set of their current production. He was sitting on a prop crate, head in his hands, looking not like a master of deception, but like a man utterly lost. He looked up as I approached, the sound of my sensible shoes echoing in the vast quiet. He quickly arranged his face into Julian's warm smile, but the mask was slipping. For the first time, I could see the exhaustion underneath. I could see Leo. Elara, what a mess, he began, the British accent wavering slightly. I was just on the phone with the gas company. But they said, I didn't let him finish. I reached into my pocket and tossed the crumpled pack of cigarettes onto the crate beside him. They landed with a soft, definitive thud. You dropped this, I said, my voice even, clinical. He stared at the pack as if it were a venomous snake. The color drained from his face. The last remnants of Julian Croft evaporated, leaving the terrified, struggling actor from Havenwood in his place. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a fear so profound it was almost paralyzing. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his Brooklyn accent, the one I'd heard in my mind, now raw and exposed. Stop, I said, the single word cutting through the air, sharp as a scalpel. The performance is over. Leo, I know about the cigarettes. I know about Julian's asthma. And I know about the foreclosure notice on your family's farm. That was the blow that broke him. A choked sob escaped his lips, and he buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. All the fight went out of him, replaced by a wave of desperate, pathetic relief, the relief of being caught. He said no one would get hurt. He whispered into his palms, the words muffled. He said it was just a strange business arrangement. Keep up appearances while he was away. He showed me the deed, the bulldozers. My parents built that house. My grandfather. He looked up at me then, tears streaming down his face. And I saw him not as a monster, but as another victim, another life being consumed by Julian's greed. I didn't know about the money. I swear, he pleaded, not until it was too late. I'm not a criminal. I'm just an actor who couldn't pay his bills. I let the silence hang between us for a moment, letting his confession settle in the dusty air. I could have called the police right then. I could have destroyed him. But a ruined, terrified Leo was no use to me. I needed a co-conspirator. The real Julian and his partner are about to finalize a deal that will destroy this entire town. Leo, I said, my voice hard, pulling him from his self-pity. They are using a forged loan against my home to do it. They have committed federal crimes. When they go down, they will not go down alone. They will pull everyone down with them. And they will make sure you take the hardest fall. His eyes widened in terror. He knew I was right. So you have a choice. I continued, kneeling down slightly to meet his gaze. My voice dropping. You can be the first casualty when this all blows up. Or you can be my inside source. You can help me stop him. He stared at me, his mind racing, searching for a trap in the lifeline I was offering. Why would you help me? He breathed. Because I'm not interested in you. Leo, I said with brutal honesty. I'm interested in justice. And you are my only path to getting it. You have access to him. You know his plans. I need to know what he's doing. When he's doing it. And where he'll be when the final deal is signed. A long moment passed. It was a choice between a life in prison and a dangerous, uncertain bet on me. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, a tremor still running through him. Then, he nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered. Okay. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, cheap burner phone. He makes me call him on this every night to give him a report. He's in Paris now, finalizing the offshore accounts with her. He told me the final signing for the Havenwood properties is happening after the Founders' Day ceremony. After he accepts his award. He handed me the phone. It felt heavy in my hand. A direct line to the man who had orchestrated all of this. An unlikely alliance was formed right there, on the dusty, forgotten stage of the Havenwood Playhouse. We were two desperate people, bound together by the manipulations of one man. And we were about to start writing a new final act. The next few days were a blur of calculated deception. At home, I played the part of the dutiful, slightly distracted wife for Leo's benefit, who in turn was playing the part of my loving husband for Julian's. We were actors in a play within a play, and the tension was a constant, thrumming presence in the house. But the real work, the real planning, happened in the most unexpected of war rooms, the dusty, cramped stockroom behind the counter at Gable's General Store. It became our secret headquarters, surrounded by the scent of coffee beans, old paper, and Mrs. Gable's lavender potpourri. The three of us began to weave our net. Maya, with her journalist's tenacity, turned the room into a whirlwind of activity. She spread a large map of Havenwood County across a sturdy oak table, her laptop glowing day and night as she cross-referenced property records, tax ids, and corporate filings. He's been clever, Maya muttered on the second night, pushing her glasses up her nose and pointing a finger at the map. He used a different LLC for each major purchase, all funneling back to Northwood Holdings. But he got arrogant. He used the same notary for every transaction. Mrs. Gable, who had joined us without a moment's hesitation, brought a different kind of intelligence. She brought the town's memory. She'd lean over the map, her gnarled finger tracing the property lines, and give each parcel a story, a human cost. That's the old Miller farm, she'd say, her voice soft but firm. Julian told them the town was seizing it for a new water treatment facility. Told them they'd get pennies on the dollar if they fought it. They were terrified. They sold to his agent for a song. She brought us ledgers and deeds from the town archives, her local knowledge cutting through Julian's legal maze. She was giving a face to his victims. My role was to be the strategist, the central hub, and to manage our asset, Leo. Every day, I'd meet him in a different secluded spot, a quiet hiking trail, the back pew of the old church, the empty bleachers of the high school football field. He was terrified, a man dangling on a wire. But he was holding up his end of the bargain. The burner phone Julian had given him became our most powerful weapon. He'd forward me Julian's texts, his voice cracking with fear. Confirmation on the final wire transfer. Set for 9 p.m. The night of the ceremony. Isabel is handling the final zoning appeal. The community center proposal is a smokescreen. It's airtight. And then, late one evening, as the Founders' Day ceremony loomed just 2 days away, Leo delivered the smoking gun. He met me behind the playhouse, his hands trembling as he passed me the burner phone. He sent this to her this afternoon, Leo whispered, his eyes darting into the shadows. He was gloating. I pressed play. It was a voice note from Julian to Isabel. His real voice, dripping with an arrogance that made my stomach turn. The best part, Izzy, is the award. They're giving me Man of the Year. They're going to stand up and applaud me. The very people whose town we're about to own. It's the perfect cover. By the time they figure out what's happened, The ink will be dry. The money will be gone. And we'll be watching the bulldozers from a beach in the Caymans. They'll be thanking me for their own destruction. The poetry of it, it's just beautiful. I played it once, then twice. It was everything we needed. The intent, the conspiracy, the contempt, it was all there. In his own voice. That night, the three of us stood in the stockroom. The voice notes saved and backed up on 3 separate hard drives. Maya had printed out every falsified deed. Mrs. Gable had a signed affidavit from 3 of the families Julian had defrauded. I had compiled the financial records, the forged loan, the wire transfers, into a clear, simple presentation. All the threads were gathered. The net was woven, tight and strong. On the main street, a banner had been hung between 2 lampposts. It read, Havenwood Founders Day, honoring our Man of the Year, Julian Croft. I looked at Maya, then at Mrs. Gable. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. The stage was set. Julian was expecting an award ceremony. He was about to get a reckoning. The applause was deafening. It washed over the man on stage. The man who looked like my husband, who had been introduced as the town's savior. He stood at the podium, basking in the adoration, the golden light making him look like a figure from a storybook. He placed his hand over his heart, his expression a perfect blend of humility and gratitude. It was the performance of a lifetime. From my position near the back of the hall, standing beside Maya and Mrs. Gable, I watched him. I felt no anger, no pain, only a profound, surgical coldness. I'm not a hero, Julian began, his voice smooth and resonant, amplified by the microphone. The heroes are all of you, the people who make this town what it is. I am just a humble architect, trying to preserve the soul of Havenwood for our children and our children's children. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. He spoke of the future while actively plotting the town's demise. He accepted their trust while orchestrating the ultimate betrayal. He finished his speech to a standing ovation. The mayor presented him with a heavy, engraved plaque. As the applause began to die down, the mayor stepped back to the microphone. As is our tradition, we'll now open the floor for a few community comments before we cut the cake. This was our moment. I felt Mrs. Gable's hand squeeze my arm. A silent transfer of strength. Maya gave me a sharp, determined nod. I moved from the shadows and walked calmly, deliberately, down the central aisle toward the public microphone standing in the middle of the floor. A few people smiled and nodded at me. Dr. Vance, the hero's wife. When I reached the microphone, a hush fell over the room. Julian, still on stage, smiled at me, a look of fond surprise on his face. He thought I was coming up to congratulate him. I'm Dr. Elara Vance, I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying through the silent hall. And while I too want to honor the spirit of this community, I'm not here to talk about the man you think you know. I'm here to talk about a sickness, a carefully planned infection that has been spreading through our town, hiding in plain sight. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. On stage, Julian's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For the past 6 months, I continued, my eyes locked on his. A predator has been moving among us, wearing the mask of a friend. And tonight, I'd like to show you its face. As I spoke, a beam of light shot from the back of the room. On the large projector screen behind Julian, an image appeared. It was the county map from our war room. Maya, hunched over her laptop, was our silent executioner. This, I said, as red circles began to appear on the map, is a map of properties recently purchased by a series of anonymous LLCs. The Miller Farm, the old logging camp, the lands bordering our historic Main Street. Next, a document flashed on the screen. A home equity line of credit. This is a loan, taken out against my home 2 months ago. The signature looks like mine, but it is a forgery. Julian was no longer smiling. He took a step back from the podium, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. And where did that $250,000 go? I asked the silent room. The next slide appeared. A wire transfer confirmation. It went to a shell corporation called Northwood Holdings, the same corporation that now owns all of this land. A photo appeared on the screen, a crystal clear shot Maya had taken in Chicago of the real Julian. his arm wrapped intimately around Isabel Devereaux. A collective gasp went through the hall. My husband, the real Julian Croft, hasn't been planting tulips in our garden, I said, my voice ringing with authority. He's been in Chicago, Paris, and the Cayman Islands, planning the hostile takeover of our town with his partner, a developer known as the Vulture. Julian lunged for the microphone on the podium. This is insane. My wife, she's been under a great deal of stress lately. She's not well, am I not? I asked calmly. Then perhaps, Julian, you can explain this. And then, there was only sound. His voice, his real voice, arrogant and cruel, filled the hall, echoing from the speakers. The best part, Izzy, is the award. They're going to stand up and applaud me. They'll be thanking me for their own destruction. The poetry of it, it's just beautiful. Dead silence. The kind of silence that is so total. It feels like a physical blow. The recording ended. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. The entire town, in one room, collectively processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Then, a single sound broke the silence. An old farmer in the front row stood up and spat on the floor in front of the stage. Then another person stood, and another. The room erupted. It wasn't a cheer, it was a roar of collective rage. On stage, Julian was trapped. The golden light of the hero's spotlight now seemed like a harsh interrogator's lamp. Pinning him in place, his face, stripped of its charming mask, was a contorted mess of fury and panic. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw pure, unadulterated hatred. The town sheriff, who had been standing by the wall, began to move purposefully toward the stage. The plaque for Man of the Year lay forgotten on the podium. The reckoning had come. The hero had fallen, and the town of Havenwood had finally seen the monster in their midst. The fallout was swift and brutal. Julian's arrest was the lead story on every news channel in the state. Isabel Devereaux was apprehended by federal agents the next morning in her Boston penthouse. Implicated by the voice note and a mountain of digital evidence provided by Maya's paper. The complex web of LLCs that made up Northwood Holdings unraveled, exposing a pattern of predatory development that went far beyond our small town. The Vulture, as it turned out, had a very wide hunting ground. But in Havenwood, something remarkable happened. The shock, the profound sense of communal violation, didn't break us, it galvanized us, led by Mrs. Gable, who seemed to shed 20 years in the face of a good fight. The town organized. They held meetings in the very hall where they'd been betrayed, poring over the evidence we'd collected. They formed a community land trust, pooling resources to legally challenge and buy back the properties that had been stolen through fraud and intimidation. They fought, not with anger, but with a stubborn, unified resolve that Julian, in all his big city arrogance, had never thought possible. And Leo Morin? His cooperation, his genuine remorse, and his testimony against Julian earned him a degree of mercy. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. He chose to serve it at the Havenwood Playhouse, using his considerable talent to teach acting to the town's children, channeling his gift for performance into something honest and real. He was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding his life from the rubble of the role that had almost cost him everything. As for me, I couldn't stay in that house. It was a beautiful home, but it was haunted by a lie. I sold it that winter, and watched from a distance as a new family, with no knowledge of its secrets, moved in. I found a small apartment above my clinic on Main Street. It was less grand, but it was mine. The experience had changed me. My clinical precision, the skill I'd used to diagnose illnesses, had been turned outward to diagnose the sickness in my own life. And in my town, I realized my purpose here was bigger than just setting broken bones and prescribing antibiotics. That spring, using a portion of the settlement from my divorce, I founded the Havenwood Community Advocacy Clinic. It was a small office next to my medical practice, offering pro bono legal advice and financial counseling to anyone facing foreclosure, predatory loans, or corporate bullying. I couldn't be a doctor who only treated the symptoms. I had to help fight the disease. The final scene. It's 6 months later. Spring has fully arrived in Havenwood. The air is sweet with the smell of lilac and damp earth. Elara is walking through the town square, which is bustling with a weekend farmer's market. There's a sense of life, of normalcy returning. She stops by a public garden bed in the center of the square. I stood there, looking at the tulips. They had just bloomed, a riot of deep reds and brilliant yellows. They were the very bulbs the impostor had been planting that fateful morning. The ones he'd said Mrs. Gable would love to see. And she did. She was there, across the square, laughing with the farmer who had gotten his land back last month. For a moment, I felt the ghost of that pain. The sharp memory of the betrayal. The foundation of those flowers was a lie. But their beauty, reaching for the sun, was undeniably real. I realized then that healing isn't about erasing the scars or forgetting the pain. It's about allowing new life to grow in the broken places. It's about turning poison into medicine. My town was still wounded, but it was healing, and so was I. We had faced the monster that wore a hero's mask, and we had survived. Not by being louder or richer, but by being bound together by the simple, honest roots of community. We were still Havenwood, and our soul was not for sale. If Elara's journey of betrayal and rebirth resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps share these stories of resilience with a wider audience. My favorite moment was when Mrs. Gable provided that crucial, intuitive clue about the smell of honesty. What was the most powerful moment for you? Share it in the comments below. For more gripping stories about the strength it takes to uncover the truth. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's next.